December 23, 1944, near noon, Senamps Hill, Belgium. A German observer from the 26th Volksgrenadier Division raised his binoculars toward the winter sky. What he saw in those frozen seconds would permanently alter his understanding of the war. The clouds had lifted for the first time in a week. Then the sky began to fill. Not with fighters, not with bombers, but with transport aircraft, hundreds of them. Wave after wave of American C-47s appeared over Bastogne, flying in perfect formation, engines droning like a mechanical tide. To the men watching from German siege positions, it was not merely an air operation. It was a revelation. This was not desperation. This was dominance. The siege before the sky opened. Just 7 days earlier, the situation had looked very different. On December 16, 1944, at 5:30 a.m., the German army launched Operation Rhine, Hitler's final gamble in the West. A massive 90-minute artillery barrage from more than 1,600 guns tore into Allied lines across the Ardennes. The objective was bold: split the Allied armies, seize Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. Initially, the plan worked. American defenses collapsed under the surprise assault. Entire units retreated in confusion. Roads opened westward. German commanders dared to believe they were witnessing a return to 1940. Among the advancing formations was Generalmajor Heinz Kochot's 26th Volksgrenadier Division, rebuilt after destruction on the Eastern Front. It was a patchwork force, a few hardened veterans mixed with Luftwaffe and naval replacements, but morale was high. They had been promised surprise, supplies, and victory. And for a moment it seemed true. Bastogne, the crucial crossroads. By December 18th, German armored columns were racing toward their objectives. Bastogne stood at the center of everything. 7 major roads converged there. Control Bastogne, and the American logistical network in the Ardennes collapsed. The plan was simple: encircle the town, starve the defenders, move on. But the Americans moved faster. Elements of the 10th Armored Division delayed the German advance just long enough for the 101st Airborne Division, rushed in by truck from France, to reach Bastogne mere hours before German forces arrived. They were exhausted, poorly equipped for winter, thrown immediately into defensive positions. But they were there. Encirclement and confidence. By December 20th, Bastogne was surrounded. All 7 roads were cut. Inside the perimeter were roughly 22,000 American troops, outnumbered at least 5-1, short on food, ammunition, medical supplies, and winter clothing. To German commanders, it looked like victory waiting to happen. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich von Leutwitz, commanding the 47th Panzer Corps, had seen encirclements before. Dunkirk, Russia, he knew how these stories ended. The Americans had days, perhaps less. Why waste fuel and tanks on a town that would surrender on its own? Nuts. On December 22nd, the Germans sent their surrender demand. It was formal, polite, confident. They offered honorable terms. The American reply came back as a single word: nuts. The Germans were confused, then offended, then unsettled. No surrounded force had ever responded like that. Still, the Germans remained certain. The weather was on their side. Allied air power remained grounded. Bastogne would fall. Then the sky cleared. December 23rd, the moment everything changed. That morning, German soldiers welcomed the sunshine, unaware it marked the beginning of their psychological defeat. At 11:50 a.m., the sound arrived first, a distant hum growing steadily louder. Then they saw them. 241 C-47 transport aircraft, flying low and straight, pouring across the Belgian sky. The formations were flawless, the confidence unmistakable. Colored parachutes bloomed over Bastogne. Red for ammunition, blue for medical supplies, yellow for food, white for equipment, green for communications, orange for fuel. German anti-aircraft guns opened fire. 88 guns, 20 cannons, machine guns. Planes were hit, some burned, some crashed. But they did not turn away. Aircraft flew through flak-held formation, dropped their cargo, and only then broke off. 14 transports were lost. It didn't matter. For every plane destroyed, dozens more continued. The arithmetic of defeat. What followed shattered German morale. This was not a desperate gamble. It was routine. By nightfall, hundreds of tons of supplies had descended on Bastogne. Artillery shells, medical teams, fuel, even refrigerated blood for transfusions, something the German army could not provide even to senior officers. American gunners fired shells that had been floating on parachutes minutes earlier. And then came the fighters. P-47 Thunderbolts returned to the skies, hunting German columns with rockets and machine guns. Roads became death traps, movement in daylight became impossible. The week-long illusion of victory collapsed in a single afternoon. What the Germans understood. By that evening, German soldiers knew something their leaders would deny for months. They were not fighting an army. They were fighting an industrial civilization. If America could risk hundreds of aircraft to supply one surrounded division, what hope remained? Bastogne was no longer a siege. It was a demonstration. The end of the illusion. German attacks continued. Christmas Day assaults failed, tanks burned, infantry froze and bled for nothing. On December 26, Patton's Third Army broke through. Bastogne was relieved. The numbers told the story. Over 1,100 tons of supplies delivered by air. More than 2,000 American air sorties. 0 German resupply flights. German generals later admitted it plainly. At Bastogne, America solved modern warfare's central problem, logistics. The final realization. Years later, General Heinz Kockott would reflect on what his soldiers saw that day. When the sky filled with American planes, every German who witnessed it understood the truth. The war did not end in Bastogne. But for those men watching the sky on December 23, 1944, it was already lost. Not because the Americans were braver. Not because they fought harder. But because they could fill the sky itself with supply, power, and certainty. And against that, rifles and horses were never enough.